Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CBE Department Freshman Seminar. My name is Shane Lee. I'm an assistant professor in this department. Today, I want to use this opportunity to tell you from the perspective of a chemical engineer how we can combat climate change by developing environmentally sustainable plastics. So let me get my slides ready. Okay. So if you take a quick look through our history, you will see that the development of human civilization is in many ways shaped by the materials we develop and use. So starting from the use of stones as tools for hunting and collecting food, even in prehistorical times, to the use of clays and metals to create objects for more complex tasks, to the invention of alloys and plastic, which have becoming an integral part of our modern society. So in particular, we all know that plastics or synthetic polymers are becoming a very important part of our lives. To give you just a few examples, the plastic bottles that you drink from are made of polyesters. The non-stick cookware you usually use contain fluorinated polymer coating on the surface. And the superabsorbent material in baby diapers, for example, is also a polymer known as polyacrylic acid. So while our lives benefit tremendously from the use of plastics, over-demand and irresponsible usage of the material is also creating a lot of problems in our society. So at the moment, most of the synthetic polymers are made from hydrocarbons, meaning that the raw materials are from oil. Therefore, the consumption of polymers leads to the depletion of carbon sources and also contribute to greenhouse gas generation. Additionally, most plastics are not biodegradable. Therefore, the disposal of these polymers is becoming a major source of pollution for our planet. So from the perspective of a polymer engineer, I believe it is impossible and somewhat unwise to try to eliminate the use of all plastics. What we really need to do instead is to develop better plastics that have the same or even better properties than the ones we are using now, but at the same time, also consider sustainability and the renewability of the material. One solution for this problem is to invent new chemistry and then invent new material. But this strategy will require a lot of investment, both in time and money. A second option, which engineers usually do, is we take existing material of desirable property and blend them to create blends. However, blending of high molecular polymer in particular is actually a very difficult technology. So if you do come to our department and take some polymer classes, you will learn that based on thermodynamics, blending of two high molecular polymers is highly unfavorable. So in most cases, what you will get are phase-separated blends that show very poor interface properties. So these solutions are not that good. So what can we do better? So my lab in particular, our strategy is to create complex materials through a blockopolymer structure. So while I cannot easily blend two polymers to create a desirable uniform mixture, what I can do is to link them by chemical bonding into a structure known as a blockopolymer. This chemical bond keeps the polymers close to each other, so the material behaves as a homogeneous single material instead of this sort of phase-separated material. Additionally, each of the polymer block in this blocopolymer structure is able to retain their individual properties. Therefore, I can use this approach to create multifunctional materials. Furthermore, blocopolymer have this additional benefit that they are capable of self-assembly to form very uniform nanostructures on the order of about 50 nanometer. So if you take a diblocopolymer, for example, the nanostructure they can form include sheet-like lamellae structure or bicontinuous gyroid, hexagonally packed cylinders, and body center cubic packed spheres. This then allows us to have an additional level of control over material structure. So in this case, you can imagine that we can have control over both the composition of the material as well as the spatial arrangement of the components as well. In particular, the type of blocopolymer that I'm interested in are hybrid blocopolymers that contains both biomacromolecules and the synthetic polymers. The biomacromolecules include things like genetic materials such as proteins and DNAs, as well as complex carbohydrate materials such as starch from, for example, potatoes, and the chitosan from the shell of seafood. So these are the bio component of the blocopolymer. In terms of the synthetic block, we also have a large range of choices. They range from somewhat hydrophobic ones, such as polystyrene and the polymethyl methacrylate, to the more hydrophilic ones, such as the famous PEG polymer. What our lab does is we apply different chemistries so that the biopolymer and the synthetic polymer can be combined into a hybrid blocopolymer. These new materials will then benefit from both the high functionality and renewability that comes from the biopolymer, as well as the high mechanical property and processability that comes from the synthetic polymer component. So we believe that by creating these hybrid blocopolymer, we're combining sort of the best from the two different worlds. So to give you just some more specific examples on things we are working on at the moment. So the first class of material we're developing at the moment are what's known as sugar-containing blocopolymers. So in this case, the biopolymer components are sugar molecules of different lengths. So they include simple sugars such as disaccharides and monosaccharides to more complex sugars such as polysaccharides. So once the sugar component and the synthetic polymer are combined together, they gave these sugar-containing blocopolymers, and we find that they can self-assemble to make nanostructure with very regular periodicity. So furthermore, the structure have sizes that are very small, in most cases less than 10 nanometers, which allows us to develop some very interesting material. One of the things we're working on is to make sphere-forming triblocopolymer so that we can use these sugar-containing blocopolymer as a greener alternative to replace the current conventional or synthetic elastomers. Additionally, since these polymers have very, very small feature sizes, less than 10 nanometer, we are also interested in using these polymers as a mask for nanolithography, and also develop them into membranes for things like air and water purification applications. The second class of hybrid material we're working on are DNA-containing blocopolymers. In this case, the biopolymer component are DNAs, which can be either single-stranded or double-stranded. One example in particular I want to highlight is this new chemistry that we developed in our lab very recently. So what we did is we utilized enzymes that can recognize and then cut and link DNAs in order to manipulate them in a controllable fashion. So just to sort of give you a very brief overview, you can imagine that you can start with any two DNA diblocopolymers. We can use enzyme to patch them into a more complex triblocopolymer structure. And then when we're done with these polymer, we can use another type of enzyme to digest them back to diblocks. And then this process goes on and then allows us to fully recycle this material. So by combining DNA and a synthetic polymer, it allows us to realize these fully recyclable materials. So to end this very short seminar, I want to just briefly highlight my lab. So we are part of the South Material Group in the CBE department. And my lab's theme, as I showed you so far, is concentrate on the development of next generation polymer materials with both functionality and sustainability designed into the material. So besides the DNA and sugar-containing blockopolymers that I mentioned, we also work with other reactive blockopolymers, as well as different polymer materials for applications such as CO2 capture and utilization. So I hope this short video gave you some idea on the type of material research that we do. If you find this topic interesting, feel free to contact me or my student for more information. And I hope in the near future, I can see some of you as undergraduate researchers working in my lab as well. So that concludes my seminar today. So again, I hope that you find this information helpful. And if there are any questions, feel free to contact me.